This is the main news of Korea today. Justice Minister Han Dong-hoon topped the pan-conservative Next Political Leader Suitability Survey. In the pan-progressive camp, Lee Jae-myung of the Democratic Party of Korea topped the list. Research View, a public opinion survey company, announced on the 2nd that Minister Han ranked first with 13% in the affidability for the next presidential candidate for pan-conservative conducted on 1,000 adult men and women aged 18 or older nationwide for 2 days on the 30th and 31st of last month. In the pan-conservative camp, Daegu Mayor Hong Joon-pyo, 12%, Seoul Mayor Oh Si-hoon, 11%, former lawmaker Yoo Seung-min, 10%, Ahn Cheol-soo People's Power, 6%, and Minister of Land, Infrastructure and Transport Won Hee-ryong, 4%. In the case of narrowing down to conservative respondents, Justice Minister Han Dong-hoon was 23%, Mayor Oh Si-hoon was 17%, and Mayor of Hong Joon-pyo was 14%. Suspicions have been raised that Judge Lee Young-jin, a judge of the Constitutional Court, was entertained with golf. The court explained that it was true that the golf meeting was held at the invitation of his hometown junior, but it had nothing to do with his duties and that he was not asked to do so. According to the legal community and the court on the 2nd, the judge attended a golf meeting in October last year at the invitation of his hometown junior. At this time, he met a businessman brought by his hometown junior, and after playing golf, he had dinner together. A paid about 1.2 million won for golf. It was reported that there was also a story about Mr. A's divorce lawsuit at the meeting that evening. A confessed his concerns about the division of property to Judge Lee. One media reported that Judge Lee said, "I know the senior judge of the family court, so I will help him," based on A's claim, but Judge Lee denied it was true at all. Judge Lee, who sent a statement through the Constitutional Court, said, "As a good word of blessing, I asked him to appoint a good lawyer and file a lawsuit well," adding, "I know the senior judge of the family court, so I never said I would help him," which is A's unilateral claim. He also said that the only contact he had with A was that he answered the next day of the golf meeting because he received a text message asking if he had gone home well. During this year's holiday, she did not give his/her address when she texted him/her asking for his/her address, saying he/she would send a gift, and added that he/she replied that he/she was sorry. Regarding media reports that A tried to deliver 5 million won in cash and golf clothing to Judge Lee through another lawyer, he also explained, "I have no knowledge at all." In fact, cash and golf clothing are reportedly kept by a lawyer other than Judge Lee. The result of Mr. A's divorce lawsuit was also not good. It is reported that the amount of property division given to his wife in the second trial has increased from the first trial before meeting Judge Lee. Judge Lee said, "I made an explanation to correct the facts and misunderstandings, but as a constitutional judge, I feel sorry for my involvement in the unsavory incident." Regarding the reform of the national pension parameters, the presidential office said on the 2nd, the Ministry of Health and Welfare will focus on it soon, adding, "I think we can reach a bipartisan agreement because all 4 major party candidates agreed on pension reform during the last presidential election." Ahn Sang-hoon, Senior Presidential Secretary for Social Affairs, said in a briefing at the presidential office briefing room in Yongsan later in the day. Ahn explained the 2-track of pension reform, including structural reform and parametric reform, and stressed that it is time to rush to reform the pension structure. Rebalancing the multi-layered structure and role of various pension systems, such as basic pensions, national pensions, and retirement pensions, is a parameter reform that balances finances through numerical adjustments such as structural reform and premium rate hikes. Structure reform was supposed to be done 5 to 10 years ago, but the previous governments failed to do it, Ahn said. If you look at the example of advanced countries that succeeded in reforming the pension structure, it usually takes more than 10 years because we are a single 5-year government. In the process of the last presidential debate, the 4 major candidates agreed on pension reform and took the first step towards structural pension reform, he said. In a recent agreement on the formation of the National Assembly, it is a historic event that the government and the National Assembly joined hands to lay the cornerstone of Korea's retirement income. In the case of parametric reform, it was not done by the previous government, but by Yoon Suk-yeol's government, Ahn said. According to the law, the last government came up with 3 proposals and 1 more at the National Assembly, and became the first government to pass without any reforms. Experts are trying to come up with 1 plan, not 3 to 4, like the last government, he added. If the National Pension Parameters Reform Plan is transferred to the National Assembly, it will be checked once more through a special pension reform committee set up in the National Assembly. However, Senior Secretary Ahn said the government will focus on promoting public debate rather than pushing for a specific plan. If you compare a country that succeeded in pension reform with a failed country, if the reform-led forces or the government tries to push ahead with a specific plan first, it will almost lose, Ahn said. If the government acts as a facilitator and tries to create a forum for public debate, it will be structural reform. He added, the Yoon Suk-yeol government also has the idea of playing a role in promoting public debate as much as possible. President Yoon Suk-yeol ordered the Ministry of Education to quickly publicize the controversy over the school reform plan, which lowers the enrollment age of elementary schools to 5 years old. Ahn Sang-hoon, Senior Secretary for Social Affairs at the Presidential Office in Yongsan, said in a briefing on the 2nd, President Yoon ordered the Ministry of Education to quickly promote public debate and act as a facilitator to enable bipartisan discussions in the National Assembly. Senior Secretary Ahn said, "It is true that the Roh Moo-hyun government pushed for the lowering of the admission age, and that it is implemented in developed countries, mainly in the US, and that all kinds of reforms, including labor and pension reforms, are the same, but education reform is not at the disposal of the President and Cabinet." He also stressed that the reorganization of the school system is a legislative issue of the National Assembly. Senior Secretary Ahn said, "In the situation of low birth rates, local financial grants are sufficient. Education reform aims to promote safe growth of children and reduce the burden of parents by integrating education and care at least to elementary schools." He then said, "The starting point of basic awareness is to provide after-school care services until parents leave work," adding, "The reorganization of the school system can be an alternative to solving the lump threads at the same time, but it is not a goal in itself." Ahn said, "It is also up to the Ministry of Education to find policy solutions to various concerns," adding, "There is no fixed answer. When there is the right reform plan, the responsibility to make it public and to communicate with the people is the priority of the government and the National Assembly," he said. He added, "I sincerely ask the public to pay attention to educational reform and gather wisdom so that a grand conclusion can be drawn. The number of Dosurok people is increasing due to the recession and the heat. It can reduce the cost of eating out, which has become burdensome, and reduce the time to come and go in the heat, so you can often find office workers who eat lunch with lunch boxes." According to the National Statistical Portal, COSIS, of the National Statistical Office on the 2nd, the consumption expenditure of all households in the first quarter of this year was 318,000 won, up 13% from the same period last year. In the case of food and accommodation costs, including dining out, the proportion of dining out increased from the second quintile, 229,000 won, to 16.3% compared to the previous year, followed by the third quintile, 326,000 won, with 15.9%. The figure can be interpreted that the price of dining out, which rose sky-high in the first half, would have added to the burden on the middle class. The so-called lunch inflation, a combination of lunch and inflation, which means lunch, with an actual lunch price of more than 10,000 won, seems to be generalizing. According to the Korea Consumer Agency's price information portal True Price Statistics under the Fair Trade Commission, the prices of 8 major restaurant items surveyed every month, including hajangmyeon, cold noodles, kalguksu, gimbap, kimchi stew, bibimbap, pork belly, and samgyetang, jumped significantly from the beginning of the year. Naengmyeon rose 4.7%, 9,808 won, to 12,269 won, while pork belly, 200 grams, rose 4.7%, from 16,983 won, to 17,783 won, from 7,077 won to 7,385 won, and samgyetang 4.0%, from 14,308 won to 14,885 won. Sales of lunchbox-related products are soaring in online shopping malls. According to Wemaike Price, sales of sealed containers have soared 83%, lunchbox spoon sets 60%, and lunchbox boxes 50% over the past 3 months. Sales of thermal and cooling functional lunch bags increased by 60% and lunchbox-only bags increased by 55%. Those who have difficulty packing their own lunch boxes are looking for lunch boxes at convenience stores or marts. It is gaining popularity as a meal substitute because it is less burdensome in the 4,001 to 5,001 range. An office worker at a small and medium-sized company, said, "These days, I eat with a lunchbox of around 4,001 at a convenience store near the company," adding, "It is convenient because it is cheap and I can reduce meal time. There are many cases of convenience store promotions, so when I buy a lunchbox, I often choose event products such as putting drinks in it," he added. According to the industry, sales of lunchboxes from 4 domestic convenience stores have grown by double digits compared to the same period last year. CU, 35.5%, GS25, 49.8%, 7-Eleven, 40%, and Emart 24, 48%. An industry official said, "There are many young office workers who want to split their lunchtime and spend it well, and the increase in the number of people who eat alone seems to be related to the increase in demand for lunchbox-related products." DP, a full-time investor who was a venture capital judge, said it has purchased the YouTube economic channel Sinsamdaeng, which has about 1.81 million subscribers, for 2 billion won. DP appeared on YouTube's Kim Rider TV on the 1st and talked about the monthly profits and prospects of Sinsamdaeng. YouTube's Sinsamdaeng has been operated by Joo Eun-kyu, a former producer of Korea Economic TV, and has more than 1 million subscribers in just 2 years since its opening, and currently has about 1.81 million. Recently, Ju said that he had transferred all the authority of the Shinsamdang to the buyer, which made headlines. The person who took over the channel was DP, who said in an interview, "I actually bought it for 2 billion won. Even if I sang 3 billion won, it wouldn't have been a no. I've been on YouTube for 3 years. Only 30,000 subscribers have been collected in 3 years. I worked hard until the middle of last year, but since then, I have only uploaded one every month. It is fun to do YouTube little by little. At first, I thought I should do it as a hobby." However, he found an article that Ju said in an interview with a media outlet that he would be able to close the Shinsamdang channel for 2 billion won, and suggested buying it. DP said, "I sent an email right away. But there was no answer because it went into spam." Later, he went to the Shinsamdang interview and talked again. "I was originally going to take over with my own money, but I bought it with company money because my vision was good," he said. "It was last January when I bought the new Shinsamdang channel," and he said, "It was at the end of last year when I presented my opinion, and the contract was signed in almost a month." He said that the monthly profit of Shinsamdang was 150 million won. "I don't think it will cost more than 20 million won per month. If you calculate this, the principal will be recovered in 15 months. The biggest risk is for Ju to fall out," he said. "Even if sales are halved and 1/3 cut, the principal will be recovered in about 2 years, about 4 years. Meanwhile, writer Kim, who conducted the interview, is a YouTuber who published books such as Lucky and YouTube Young Rich, and has won the Korea Talent Award. The National Solidarity for the Elimination of Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities, InGilBang Yeon, a left-wing civic group, staged a protest on the way to work on Subway Line 4 on the 3rd. According to the Seoul Metropolitan Transportation Corporation, InGilBang Yeon began a propaganda campaign to take the subway on her way to work at the Samguk area from 8 am on Line 4. InGilBang Yeon will hold a demonstration from Samguk to Hwa Station following the previous day. InGilBang Yeon resumed the subway protest on her way to work at Gwanghae Wamun Station on Subway Line 5 on the 1st, and also held a protest in the triangular area of Subway Line 4 the previous day. InGilBang Yeon has been conducting a subway propaganda campaign on her way to work since December last year, demanding that the budget for disabled rights be reflected in next year's budget, the revision of 4 major laws on disabled rights, and the Seoul Metropolitan Government's ordinance to support disabled facilities. InGilBang Yeon was asked to attend by 6 police stations, but refused to investigate and returned because there were no convenience facilities for the disabled at the police station. Police will investigate InGilBang Yeon at Namdaemun Police Station on the 31 St. Cho Eun-hee, a lawmaker of the People's Power, proposed a revision to the Act on the Prevention and Management of Lonely Deaths for Early Detection and Prevention of Lonely Death Risk Groups as the first bill on the 2nd. The revision proposed by lawmaker Cho supplemented the fact-finding survey in the original plan. In order to achieve information cooperation, the Ministry of Health and Welfare and local governments as well as local governments will establish an integrated system for supporting lonely death early, and prevent lonely death early by requesting and using resident registration data, credit and health information, social security information, and other information prescribed by presidential decree. Meanwhile, solitude death refers to a death in which a person who lives alone, disconnected from the people around him, is killed alone by suicide or soldiers, and a body is found after a certain period of time. The number of elderly people and single-person households is increasing rapidly. According to the National Statistical Office, the proportion of single-person households was 33.4% last year, and the number of elderly people aged 65 or older living alone was 1.824 million, up nearly 10% from a year ago. Controversy over the recurrence of the food after treatment of the COVID-19 treatment Paxlovid is heating up. Even though U.S. President Joe Biden is asymptomatic, COVID-19 recurred after taking Paxlovid, raising concerns that the worst could happen if this happens to severely ill patients. According to major U.S. foreign media, Dr. Kevin O'Connor, Biden's doctor, said in a recent health memo that the anti-Tisan test is still positive, adding, "Considering the recurrence of his positive behavior reported yesterday, we continue to monitor it every day." Earlier, after being confirmed with COVID-19 on July 21, President Biden received treatment for the antiviral drug Paxlovid in quarantine, and resumed his official activities after being tested negative on the 27th of the same month. However, 3 days later, on the 30th of the same month, he was tested positive again and went into quarantine. Unlike the first infection, which complained of runny nose, dry cough, and fatigue, the medical staff said they showed no symptoms this time. Paxlovid helps people with mild or moderate symptoms of COVID-19 to prevent their condition from worsening due to critical illness or death. However, according to foreign media, there are often cases of recurrence of the disease again in 2 to 8 days after a set 5-day Paxlovid treatment. However, most of the symptoms were light, and the symptoms already experienced tended to be repeated. Some were tested positive even though they did not have symptoms. The case where COVID-19 is tested positive again after being treated with Paxlovid and cured is called a Paxlovid rebound. According to Healthline.com, a U.S. health-related media outlet, CDC surveyed 5,200 people who were prescribed Paxlovid in California from December 2021 to May 2022, and less than 1% of people visited a serious recurrence emergency room or hospitalized within 5 to 15 days after taking all the medicine. Half of them were 65 years of age or older and 3/4 had underlying diseases. Researchers at the University of California San Diego Medical School said, the dose of Paxlovid may not be enough to completely prevent the virus from replicating, so some people may decompose too early or take more time to suppress the virus, so the duration of the dose may be extended. Just as humans have yet to develop a clear treatment to conquer colds, COVID-19 is also a type of cold, and Paxlovid may not be a perfect treatment, he said. However, if recurrence symptoms continue after Paxlovid prescription, additional clinical trials may resume to study whether the drug has a really effective effect. China continues to widen the gap with Korea in the battery market, called the second semiconductor. Chinese battery manufacturers, led by CATL, achieved nearly 20% of market share in global markets except for their own countries. As global automakers are recently expanding their adoption of lithium iron phosphate LFP batteries centering on mid to low-priced electric vehicle lineup, it is expected to pose a major threat to the stronghold of Korean batteries. According to SNE research on the 2nd, the global battery market excluding China in the first half of this year was 90.2 gigawatts, GWh, up more than 41% from 64.2 gigawatts, GWh, during the same period last year. 3 South Korean battery companies accounted for more than half of the total market as they increased their market share. Japanese battery companies also continued their presence around Panasonic, which drew attention as Chinese battery companies made strides in just a year. By company, LG Energy Solution ranked first in the first half of this year, while SK On and Samsung SDI ranked 4th to 5th, respectively. The battery capacity of 3 South Korean battery companies was 49.1 gigawatt-hours, GWh, with a combined market share of 54.5%. Chinese battery companies, which have the world's largest domestic market on their backs, have expanded their presence outside of Korea. The market share of 4 companies, CATL, Invision AESC, Shine Wangda and BID, increased by more than 3 percentage points from 15.7% in the first half of last year to 18.8% in the first half of this year. The perception that Chinese battery companies are strong only in domestic demand is gradually breaking. Recently, Chinese companies are threatening Korean battery makers' home turf by showing their price competitiveness. CATL, China's #1 battery maker, supplied batteries to the new Kia Niro electric car, while BID plans to supply batteries to the new electric car that Ssangyong Motor plans to release next year. On the other hand, Korean battery manufacturers are reluctant to target the Chinese market. This is because the Chinese government has focused on LFP batteries as detailed standards for subsidies to give preferential treatment to domestic companies, and some companies, including BID, are producing finished cars and batteries together. An official from a battery company said, electric cars continue to pour out in China, but it is not easy to attack as domestic companies have only a small portion of demand for three-way batteries. As global automakers such as Mercedes, Audi, and BMW are pushing to adopt LFP batteries. China began a military drill on Tuesday using live fire in areas surrounding Taiwan as a military response to U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. According to CNN, the Eastern Light Bulb of the People's Liberation Army of China, which is in charge of Taiwan, will begin a series of joint military operations at sea and air around Taiwan from the night of the 2nd. This action is a stern warning against the recent escalation of U.S. negative movements in Taiwan, which has led to a serious threat to the independence of Taiwan's independence forces, Colonel Shui, a spokesman for the Eastern Light Bulb, said in a statement. Sui said joint maritime and air exercises will be conducted in waters and airspace in northern, southwestern, and southeastern Taiwan, and long-range firearm live ammunition will be fired in the Taiwan Strait. Test shots will also be conducted in eastern Taiwan's waters. It is said that it will conduct strong military exercises surrounding Taiwan, an island nation, in the form of virtually surrounding it from east to west, north to south. The U.S. sent a seriously wrong signal to Taiwan's independent forces, further escalating tensions in the Taiwan Strait. The Chinese People's Liberation Army will fight back with a series of targeted military actions to defend the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the country, a spokesman said in a statement. China's state-run Xinhua news agency said the People's Liberation Army will conduct a military exercise from 12 p.m. to 12 p.m. on the 4th to 12 p.m. on the 7th. In addition, ships and aircraft are not allowed to enter the area for safety during the period. Military tensions in the region are expected to escalate further as China launches an all-out military exercise over Taiwan against Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. The U.S. has also deployed its aircraft carrier Ronald Reagan and 4 warships near Taiwan. Pelosi arrived at Taipei's Songshan Airport on a military plane that night. U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who stepped on Taiwan despite China's strong opposition, stressed the U.S. solidarity with the Taiwanese people in her first message after her visit to Taiwan. The U.S. congressional delegation's visit to Taiwan follows a firm commitment by the U.S. to support Taiwan's strong democracy, Pelosi said in a statement shortly after arriving at Taipei's Songshan Airport on Tuesday night. The remarks are interpreted as making it clear that his visit to Taiwan, the third largest U.S. power, is a defense of U.S. democracy against Communist China. He revealed the reason for his visit to Taiwan amid strong opposition and controversy from China. This visit is part of a trip to the Pacific region focusing on mutual security, economic partnership, and democratic governance, including Singapore, Malaysia, Korea, and Japan, Pelosi said in a Washington Post article titled "Why I Lead a Congressional Delegation to Taiwan." The discussions with Taiwan partners will focus on reaffirming our support for Taiwan and promoting common interests, including the development of the free and open Indo-Pacific region, he said, reiterating the alliance between the U.S. and Taiwan. We must be with Taiwan, he said, adding that attempts to determine Taiwan's future by any means other than peaceful means should be remembered by the Taiwan Relations Act, a threat to peace and security in the Western Pacific region and a grave concern for the United States. In particular, China has been increasing tensions with Taiwan in recent years, and expressed concern that Taiwan's democracy is currently under threat. China has strengthened its patrols of bombers, fighter jets, and reconnaissance planes near and even beyond Taiwan's air defense zone, and the U.S. Defense Department concluded that the Chinese military is likely to prepare for an emergency to unify Taiwan by force, he said. China is conducting dozens of cyber attacks on Taiwan's government agencies every day, pressuring global companies to cut ties with Taiwan, and threatening countries that cooperate with Taiwan, he said. The visit of U.S. congressional delegations in the face of accelerating attacks from the Chinese Communist Party should be seen as the U.S. with its democratic partner, Taiwan. Pelosi said the visit to Taiwan does not contradict the One China policy that has been sustained by the Taiwan Relations Act, the three major U.S. China joint statements, and the six major guarantees of Taiwan's actual sovereignty. He also criticized, as Chinese President Xi Jinping strengthened his power, he continues to ignore harsh human rights records and the rule of law. China has thrown the promise of one country, two systems into the trash can, he said, referring to the situation in Hong Kong. He then accused Tibet and Xinjiang of committing genocide of minorities, saying, the Chinese Communist Party should not stand by and watch for the continued threat to Taiwan and democracy itself. Pelosi is the highest-ranking U.S. official to visit Taiwan 25 years after House Speaker Newt Gingrich in 1997. He is expected to leave the country in the afternoon after meeting with Taiwan's president on the 3rd, visiting the Legislative Yuan and the Human Rights Museum, and meeting with Chinese dissidents. Thank you for watching today.